France declares a national state of emergency as death toll rises to 128. Egypt harshly condemns Paris attacks. And the attacks on Paris heighten pressure at Vienna-Syria talks. Welcome back. The series of attacks targeting young concert-goers, soccer fans and Parisians enjoying a Friday night at popular night spots killed at least 127 people, the deadliest violence to strike France since World War II. French President François Hollande condemned it as terrorism and pledged that France would stand firm against its foes. Meanwhile, the Daesh terrorist group claimed responsibility for the deadliest attack. Here's the story.
Gunmen and bombers entered a concert hall and a sports stadium at locations across Paris on Friday, killing at least 128 people in a deadly rampage that a shaken President François Hollande called an unprecedented terrorist attack. A Paris City Hall official said 4 gunmen systematically slaughtered at least 87 young people at a rock concert. Anti-terrorist commandos eventually launched an assault on the building. The gunmen detonated explosive belts and dozens of shock survivors were rescued while bodies were still being removed on Sunday morning. Some 40 more people were killed in 5 other attacks in Paris region, including an apparent double suicide bombing outside the Stade de France National Stadium, where Hollande and the German foreign minister were watching a friendly soccer international. Some 200 people were injured. The coordinated assault came as France, a founder member of the US-led coalition waging airstrikes against Daesh terrorist group, was on high alert for terrorist attacks ahead of a global climate conference due to open later this month. After being whisked from the stadium near the Hollande declared a national state of emergency, the first since World War II. Border controls were temporarily imposed. The Paris Metro Railway was closed and schools, universities and municipal buildings were ordered to stay shut on Saturday.
On another front, the presidency here in Egypt condemned the terrorist acts that occurred in France and led to the deaths of tens of victims. Presidential spokesman Ambassador Ala Youssef said that Egypt's ambassador to Paris was delegated by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to offer Egypt's condolences to the French leadership, government and people. Egypt's ambassador was also delegated to confirm Egypt's solidarity with France and its support to international exerted to fight terrorism. The presidential spokesman added that such terrorist attacks only serve to increase the will of the international community to fight terrorism. Back to France, President François Hollande declared 3 days of national mourning following the deadly Paris attacks that claimed the lives of 128 people and left 200 people wounded. World leaders led a global chorus of solidarity with France. France was placed on a nationwide state of emergency after the gun bomb attack on Friday, which targeted restaurants, a concert hall and crowds near the National Sports Stadium. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister said on Saturday, as he arrived in Vienna for talks, that the heinous Paris attacks are a violation of all religions and underlined the need to intensify efforts against terrorism. In the United Arab Emirates, President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan sent a telegram to French President François Hollande offering his condolences and pledging support for France. He also supported doing what it takes to face terrorism and eliminating it. The ruler of Kuwait, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, said in a statement that he offered his condolences while stressing that these acts run counter to all teachings of holy faith and humanitarian values. For his part, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani sent a similar message to French President François Hollande, condemning the terror attacks in Paris that claimed the lives of over 127 people. Itself had been a victim of terrorism, and the fight against terrorism must go on. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi also condemned gun and bomb attacks in Paris, saying that they showed the need for action against militants worldwide. Meanwhile, US President Barack Obama is calling the attacks on Paris outrageous attempt to terrorize innocent civilians and vowed to do takes to help bring the perpetrators to justice. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev said that the simultaneous attacks in Paris are a call to unite against extremism, while Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned the despicable terrorist attacks in Paris. The UN Security Council also condemned the barbaric and cowardly terrorist attacks and underlined the need to bring the perpetrators of terror attacks to justice. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that she will meet with ministers over the series of attacks in Paris, as she pledged to do everything to help France in its fight against terror. For his part, British Prime Minister David Cameron said he was shocked by the Paris attacks and violence. Germany has offered France the help of its special anti-terror unit in the wake of the Paris attacks. Germany's Interior Minister said in a statement that he is in touch with his French counterpart. In another development, Bavaria's state premier said that there was reason to believe that a man arrested last week with several weapons in southern Germany was linked to the Paris attacks. Police had confirmed the arrest on November 5th during a routine check on a motorway, saying many machine guns and explosives were found in the suspect's vehicle. However, the police spokesman would not confirm the link with Friday's attacks in Paris. In Iran, President Hassan Rouhani postponed what would have been the first visit to Europe by an Iranian president in 10 years, after attacks in Paris that he described as crimes against humanity. Rouhani had been due to hold talks on Rome today with Pope Francis, as well as Italian counterpart Sergio Mattarella and Prime Minister Matteo Renzi, before travelling on to the French capital. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, who had been due to travel with Rouhani, told state television he would now instead head Iran's delegation to international talks on the Syrian conflict in Vienna. Deputy Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdulhani had been due to lead the Iranian team. Rouhani sent a message of condolences to French counterpart François Hollande on the shootings and bombings in Paris. For her part, the European Union's foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini said that the spate of bloody attacks in Paris had given new meaning to global efforts to resolve the war in Syria. The statement came as some 20 countries and world bodies are meeting in Vienna in a bid to end the nearly 5-year conflict that has left 250,000 people dead, sparked a refugee crisis in Europe, and given rise to Daesh, which has terrorized many nations at the table. The Paris attacks come a day after twin bombings in Beirut left 44 people dead. Over in Russia, Moscow called on the international community to unite in its fight against terrorism after the Paris attacks. Here's the story.
Arab and South terror attacks in France increased the pressure on some 20 countries and organizations meeting in Vienna on Saturday to overcome divisions and help end crisis in Syria. It is said that gunmen killed at least 120 citizens in Friday's wave of attacks and blamed France's military intervention in Syria against Daesh. The Vienna talks involving key players, Saudi Arabia and Iran, as well as Russia. Arriving in the Austrian capital, Saudi Arabia's Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir said that the terrorist attacks in France are in violation and contravention of all ethics. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who met with Jubeir as well as the UN Special Envoy for Syria, had said before talks that a big breakthrough was unlikely. In almost 5 years, fighting between Assad's regime and rebel groups as well as Daesh has killed over 250,000. Others have headed to Europe, causing major divisions in the European Union. At the last Syria talks on October 30, officials urged the United Nations to broker a peace deal between the regime and the opposition. Building on that, this round of talks in Austria will try to agree on a roadmap for peace that would include a ceasefire between Assad's forces and some opposition groups.
Bring you back home, where the Minister of Civil Aviation said that Egypt Air has decided to suspend a flight which was scheduled to arrive at Moscow on Saturday after receiving a notice from a Russian airport that it had cancelled the flight. Kamel added that after media reports stated that Russia has placed a ban on Egypt Air flights, Egypt will continue its contacts with Russia to get a clear vision on the latest developments. Earlier, the Minister of Civil Aviation said that final 7 seconds of the cockpit voice recording from the Russian plane that crashed on October 31st in Sinai were brought for analysis. Kamel said that a copy of the recording needs to be analyzed with technology unavailable in most countries after the team investigating the crash said the recordings include a last-second noise. For his part, the Minister of Tourism, Hisham Zazour, said that Egypt and Russia are communicating to solve the crisis following a halt of Egypt air flights to Moscow. Zazour said that the tourism, aviation and foreign ministries are communicating with the Russian side to solve the crisis. After Russia's aviation agency decided to halt the Egypt air flights from Cairo to Moscow, the Minister of Aviation issued a statement saying that Egypt is communicating with Russia to understand the reasons behind the decision. The World Tourism Organization, the WTO, urged the international community to pool its resources to protect travel against terrorism fears that have threatened the industry in North Africa. On the opening day of a conference on tourism in Tunis, WTO Secretary General Talib Rafai said that the entire international community has the responsibility to help and support the region. The two-day conference organized by the WTO and the Tunisian government follows attacks in Tunis and the seaside resort of Sousa that killed 60 people, all except one of them foreign tourists. The Israeli military demolished the West Bank homes of 4 Palestinians who allegedly carried out deadly attacks on Israelis. The military carried out the demolition orders after clearance from the Supreme Court. It said the homes in Nablus and Ramallah belonged to Palestinians.